You're listening to Potato Pasta, the best stories from the internet narrated by a human. The following prompt was written by Still Thinking. You are kidnapped by time travelers who explain that you were the key person affecting their history, and this is their one chance to fix things. As the doors open to their time, you see them all gasp. Nothing has changed, they say. Yeah, you say. You probably wanted my twin brother. The following response was written by Thisnameistrashy. Wait, what? The time travelers gasped upon opening the doors of their time machine. The world outside was covered in a wide haze, with skyscrapers rising far, far beyond what the eye could see. Either these kidnappers had a really good set and were clinically insane, or they were the real deal. Not what you were expecting? I asked them.
Nothing changed,
the time traveler on the left said, and looked at the person standing next to her. From there, I could see that she was wearing a stylized mask of a wolf's head.
Where did we go wrong?
Yeah, you probably wanted my twin brother, Ramon Gutierrez. He's the guy who's always tinkering with robots and computers and stuff. I was visiting him on campus when you guys showed up. The person in the middle turned back towards me, revealing his lion mask. He whispered something to Wolf Mask, then looked at me again. Ramon would be studying in UCLA right now, so that checks out, Lion Mask said. He started saying to nobody in particular, I didn't know Ramon had a twin brother, you know. How did we confuse them? The other two time travelers nodded. The third, wearing a mask with a mouse head on it, said, Not much information about his family in our records. What's your name for the archives? Pedro Gutierrez, I replied. Couldn't blame him, you know. If I was a maniacal tech trillionaire, I don't think I'd want to be associated with a man arrested 5 times before turning 20, let alone what I'd do in the future. I laughed at myself. Mouse Man looked surprised, but nodded understandingly. I guess we should get you back to your time then. We don't have mind-erasing technology, so I'll just give you a stock recommendation instead. Would that work? I laughed. Sure, go ahead. You're from March 2023, right? Silicon Valley Bank is going to fold real soon. I'm sure you could get a lot of money off that. Already happened. Damn it, Mouse Mask said. Well, that was our stock recommendation and the last of our time travel fuel. Let's get back to the future, boys. As their time machine powered up and disappeared behind me, I picked up a book that the time travelers must have dropped when chasing me. It was some sort of manifesto against the mega corporations, which apparently supplanted world governments by the time it was written, plus a history of how they took over. Sunshine Systems Incorporated. It's a stupid name, but it kind of works for a tech company, I noted to myself. I'd been thinking about the ideas behind how this future company worked for a while now. Clearly I was onto something. The truth is, Pedro Gutierrez doesn't exist. And Ramon had just unlocked a cheat code to take over the world. It'll feel good to be king of the world, I thought to myself as I left for my next class. The following response was written by HSeratta. You don't think we know what we're doing? Kurt sneered at the bound man. The fact that his timeline was still the same filled him with confusion and anger. It was easy to direct it at the one responsible. Your name is Fred Carter? You're very clearly not your brother named Frank Carter, correct? We can time travel. We kind of already mastered record keeping. Yeah, that's me, Fred sighed and slumped his shoulders. He wiggled his fingers behind his back so that they didn't fall asleep. The straps were starting to hurt his wrists. That's different. Mary, the one kidnapper that was nice to Fred, spoke up suddenly. Different is good. Kurt left Fred's chair and walked across the small room to join Mary. The older, silver-haired woman was keeping watch by the door. The rest of the team that introduced themselves to Fred as they kidnapped him all dispersed to check on other things. As Kurt reached her, Mary was in the process of opening the door. What are you doing? He asked, then rushed to push it closed. But he stopped as soon as he saw why she opened it. Even Fred was surprised to see a red house cat walk in. Its fur was vibrant scarlet red, except for a patch of white fur on its head. The white patch resembled a skull, and Fred hoped it was just a coincidence.
Thank you.
The cat looked up at Mary and nodded. Fred felt the air in the room tense. He guessed talking cats weren't normal in the future either. You can talk? Kurt asked the cat. It looked up at him, then back to Mary.
May I talk to whomever is in charge, please?
She asked politely. Her voice was light and pleasant. I'm in charge, Kurt answered. The cat looked back at him.
Really? With stupid questions like that?
Until that moment, Fred had no idea cats could shrug.
I guess,
she mumbled. Then she leaped up on a nearby desk to talk to Kurt.
My name is Janet. I represent Sharp Development.
The cat introduced herself. Never heard of you. Or them, Kurt said.
Obviously.
The cat nodded.
I wouldn't have to be here if you did.
You got some attitude, cat. What do you want? Kurt said.
Ms. Sharp, my boss, sent me to see what it is you're trying to accomplish by traveling through time so recklessly,
she said.
We're trying to fix our timeline.
Mary spoke up. Kurt immediately glared at her. Who the hell is Mrs. Sharp? Kurt growled. We don't know her any Kurt stopped talking mid-sentence. His mouth hung open and his eyes stared blankly at Janet.
You're in charge now.
Janet looked at Mary. Fred studied Kurt from his seat. The angry man seemed frozen in time, but he himself could still move, and so could Mary.
Excuse me?
Mary asked.
He's fine. I'd just rather talk to someone that's willing to communicate. You can't fix your timeline, though,
she added.
The ending was already planned out since your universe started. There's no deviating from that.
No!
Mary shook her head.
We can travel through time,
she argued, but her voice didn't sound very convinced. Janet shook her head.
The multiverse is a funny place,
she replied.
But there are certain laws that cannot be broken. Minor alterations may be made. Something blue instead of something red and the like. But overall, your Earth has a set program to run.
Multiverse?
Mary asked.
Our Earth?
Fred was glad she caught those words. He was eager to know too, but he was mostly thankful Janet didn't seem interested in him.
Yeah.
Janet nodded.
You've actually been hopping between universes more often than time traveling,
she said.
But you've done both.
How?
Mary asked.
I've seen the past every time. He's from the past.
She pointed at Fred. He half smiled at Janet and nodded his head because he couldn't wave.
Time moves at a different rate on each Earth. The present for some of them may look like your past, or even future. You found him,
Janet nodded at Fred,
on a different Earth.
Mary turned and stared at Fred for a moment.
So there's no way to fix it?
Mary asked Janet. The cat shook her head.
There's no way to go back in time and fix it, but you can still make changes to now,
she said.
You said whatever's going to happen is going to happen,
Mary replied. Janet nodded.
Whatever's going to happen in the world is going to happen, but it's a broad happening. Like I said, you can change small things. Start by making some decisions. Now that you've met me, Sharp Development is glad to help the people on your Earth move to a better one, if you like.
Mary's face lit up as she nodded eagerly. Janet turned and nodded at Fred.
Your Earth is doing okay. Since you're here, though, you're invited to see the multiverse too, you and your brother,
she said. Out of the entire conversation, that was what surprised Fred the most. How did you know I have a brother? He asked. Janet giggled and Frank realized the cat could smile. She tilted her head at the still time-locked Kurt.
You don't matter as much as he thought, but he still thought you were more important than his first attempt when he grabbed your brother. Twice.
Mary giggled quietly to herself.
Yeah.
Janet nodded.
It was all the traveling to the same time on the same Earth that caught our attention. You're actually his third attempt.
The following response is written by organicginger. It started as a prank. 15-year-old twins, Sean and Shane, what were their parents thinking? Conspired over the summer to switch places and see if anyone noticed. The boys were completely identical. When they were younger, their mom had dressed them in specific colors, and even took to painting a finger or toenail in the prescribed color when the boys entered an irksome streaking phase as toddlers. Unfortunately, their mom had passed away suddenly from an aneurysm when they were 11, and Dad was too overwhelmed to maintain her systems. He chose to trust the boys. They had always been good, responsible kids, and he saw no reason not to. Perhaps it was an acting out, a cry for attention. Dad worked long hours as a tax attorney. Recently, he had begun dating and was 4 months and moving fast into a relationship with a colleague, leaving even less time for the boys. Outwardly, the boys seemed supportive and largely self-sufficient. Inwardly, they suffered without the attention and love their mom used to dote on them. It started on a trip to Cabo San Lucas with their dad and his new girlfriend, Nellie, where Dad had hoped the boys would begin developing a bond with the woman he was already daydreaming about proposing to. The boys decided to switch places for the day to mess with Nellie. A day turned into the rest of the trip, going so far as to switch passports for the trip home. Drunk on their success, the boys decided to keep it up for a solid month. But it was too easy, and as the start of the school year loomed, the boys decided to continue their ruse into the 10th grade. 30 years later, and the ruse continued. The boys hadn't fathomed how hard it would be to untangle their actions. Shane, really Sean, had fallen in love with a girl, Cynthia, who he began dating in October of sophomore year. Sean, really Shane, saw no reason to spoil that for his brother and had begun developing a path of his own, one which would ultimately see him accepted into a top biochemical engineering program and working in a government-funded defense lab. It was here that Sean developed something that would, in a decade's time, lead to the rapid death of nearly 30% of the world's population and drastically declined birth rates and lifespans long into the future. A week before Sean's big discovery, Shane had just finished moving into his new townhouse. He and his wife had recently separated after 3 decades together. They had been high school sweethearts, marrying the year after graduating college. Shane immediately continued on to law school, following in his father and stepmother Nellie's footsteps. Cynthia had intended to start graduate school when she became pregnant with twins and decided to join her parents' business instead to ensure flexibility and support from her family as she embarked on motherhood. After their 4th child started college, she quickly crumbled. Shane had devoted himself to his career while Cynthia had sacrificed herself to motherhood and the family business, and now craved the life she had missed out on. There was nothing left of the high school sweethearts. After a year of trying to reconnect, it was clear they had changed too much and their dreams were too divergent. It was Shane's 2nd night in the new place. He had taken a week off of work to get situated and decided to indulge in takeout and a marathon of the Back to the Future trilogy, a favorite from his childhood. Shane answered the knock at the door, hungrily anticipating the Chinese takeout on the other side. But the moment he turned the knob, he found himself sliding back onto the hardwood floor. 3 men rushed in, reaching for him as a series of metal straps began binding his arms and legs together. He cried out as one of the men stuck a needle in his arm, but a second man slapped a mask over his face that immediately cut off the sound. "It's Sean!" the first man barked, looking down at a small device he had just plunged the needle into. The 3 men hoisted Shane upright and carried him out of the house and into the side of a white van. A 4th man pressed hard on the gas, throwing Shane and the others backwards. Still bound and unable to brace himself, Shane hit his head on the side wall and fell unconscious. When he came to, he was in a dimly lit basement, being loaded onto what looked like a large metal shed. Once inside, he was dazzled by an array of lights, switches, and displays. 2 of the men began hurriedly manipulating the controls, while the other 2 held Shane on either side. The man to his right removed the silencing mask, but before he could utter a sound, there was a deafening roar and everything went pitch black. A split second later, the door to the shed opened. The light from beyond blinded Shane at first, but his vision adjusted and he saw a large gray room occupied by about a dozen people, half of whom appeared to be dressed in black and pointing weapons straight at him. A petite woman in green approached and gestured to a chair on her right. The man holding Shane's right side tapped something on his back and the metal straps released. He was swiftly ushered into the room and the petite woman smiled warily and said, "Sit." Shane's head was pounding. His mind quickly began to flicker through what he had just experienced. He was just beginning to recount the moment the men captured him when the petite woman turned to the men still in the shed structure and said,
"Did you verify this is him?"
"Yes, the DNA was a match."
Immediately, Shane recalled the same man saying,
"It's Sean,"
as he was being snatched up from his entryway floor. "I'm not Sean." The petite woman frowned and glared at the man in the shed and back to Shane. She held out her hand as the man placed the device with the needle into her palm. The petite woman studied the device for a few moments. "What is going on?" yelled Shane.
"Your DNA is a direct match."
"I'm Shane. My twin brother is named Sean, but who?"
"Are you not a biochemical engineer?"
"I'm a lawyer. My brother..." "Wait, what the hell's going on?" A red-headed woman stepped forward next to the petite woman, thumbing urgently through a file.
"Bear with me,"
the petite woman pleaded, extending her palm in front of her.
"It's the year 2127. Humanity has faced a terrible crisis that started 102 years ago in 2025, when you created something in your lab that was released into society several years later, killing off nearly a third of the Earth's population within months. Ever since, human life expectancy has been cut in half, and birth rates have declined to less than 1 child per couple. We have been unable to reverse the effects of what you created, no matter how hard we have tried. Last year, a team of scientists unlocked the ability to time travel. After several tragic accidents, today we finally succeeded. Our mission was to bring you here to stop your creation.
The petite woman looked over at the red-headed woman next to her.
Although, as I stand here, it dawns on me that nothing here seems to have changed.
I don't even know what to say, except that I'm not who you think I am. I'm a lawyer. My brother works for a lab. Is this for real?
Yes.
The petite woman motioned to a screen on the wall where video footage about the crisis began to play. Shane began to sob.
But kids!
The red-headed woman pulled from a file a pastel blue and yellow paper with a little tuft of golden hair and a plastic baggie affixed to it. She handed it to Shane.
This is your hair sample from your baby book. Shane had 4 children, only one of whom survived. We have no record of Sean ever having kids, but the last century has seen an overwhelming amount of war and destruction as resources have been scarce. So many records have been lost. Shane's sole surviving child happened to have the baby book kept by your mother that contained hair samples from you and your brother. While you are identical twins, there is a small amount of genetic difference. Your DNA matches this sample, which says Sean right on top of the paper.
Shane swallowed back a hard lump as tears stung his eyes. So much swirled through his head, but suddenly his eyes jolted open. Oh my God! Oh no. When we were teens, my brother and I switched identities. It was meant to be a prank, but it went too far, and eventually we couldn't see a way out of it. So we stuck with it, and it became our lifelong secret. I am Sean, but I have been known by Shane since I was 15 to everyone but my brother, who took over my identity. The room grew eerily quiet and still. A balding man approached Shane and gestured at the hair sample.
May I?
Wordlessly, he took the sample back to a wall of machines. The red-headed woman pulled out another page identical to the first, but with Shane written on top, and brought it to the man. The petite woman turned and walked back with the needle device she still clutched in her hand. After several minutes of distressed whispering, the petite woman returned.
I don't even know what to say. Your blood DNA matches your hair sample, but as crazy as your story is, I can't see any other explanation. We will attempt to send back another crew to collect your brother to verify, and hopefully fix things. In the meantime, we will set you up with living quarters here.
Back in 2025, candlelight flickers across a crowd of solemn faces. Cynthia wipes her tears as she approaches the police chief's side. Her children huddle close with their grandfather and Nellie. The chief gives her shoulder a squeeze and steps aside, revealing a protrusion of microphones. Cynthia stutters as she breathes in deeply.
Thank you all for coming tonight. It means so much to our family. To Shane and Sean, if you're out there and can see this, we love you. We won't give up until we find you both and bring you home.
Thanks for sticking with me till the end. If you enjoy my narrations, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you want to know when new videos come out, hit the bell and make sure you select all notifications. I know it's annoying to ask, but it really does help the channel reach more people. Thank you.